Will Royal Court ruin Crusader Kings 3? Possibly Paradox Interactive itself. The reason why I'm making this video is because I don't think people understand how much is resting on this DLC's release. In 2021, Paradox experienced one of their worst years in recent memories, and we'll be breaking down all of these shortcomings in the past year and some other things that you may not know about. To get out of this way, a lot of these concerns for this DLC don't actually come from the DLC itself, but the outside factors that may be creating so much pressure for the game and unrealistic expectations that it will lead the game to fall flat. The DLC concepts itself are out of the shelf for Paradox Studios, and they need to be, because after going over this video, you will realize how much Paradox needs to have a killer DLC. Crusader Kings 3 has been a great game, but it has not been the grand slam that Paradox was looking for and that Paradox currently needs. With a mixture of tons of pressure and trying things the studio has never done before, this can either create a recipe for greatness, but could also create a recipe for failure that they might not be able to recover from. This is the point in Crusader Kings 3 history where they may be rising to the greatest Paradox game ever made, or fall into their shadows of their catalog. Before we get started, for those that don't know who I am, I'm TheGraveOne. I am a huge Crusader Kings 3 fan. I have around 1,500 hours of playing, watching, and making videos on Crusader Kings 3. I have over 365 videos on Crusader Kings 3, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. For actual reasons why I am able to talk about this is I also have a degree in game design as well. I'm currently a Master's of Business Administration student, which is an MBA. It's a graduate school high level thing for business. The biggest point, and pretty much the reason why I'm afraid that they may be trying to shoot for the moon here and they might come short, is because of the pressure. It's pretty much going to be the entire video of the pressure that is on this DLC and the pressure that most people don't realize. One of the biggest reasons is because of the failures in recent history of Paradox Interactive. One of them being Imperator Rome. Imperator Rome was a favorite of mine for Paradox Interactive, but we cannot even argue that it was a failure. Paradox themselves have stopped supporting and updating the game, pretty much showing that it's a failure. They have stopped with around 2 years of development due to low player base, even though games like Europa Universalis 4 and Hearts of Iron 4 have been getting support for 9 and over 6 years. With failure, Paradox has to make this newest title, Crusader Kings 3, amazing. They have to make it not follow the steps of Imperator Rome. If it falls, and this DLC fails, it could ruin Paradox and hurt them to a place where they cannot recover. Crusader Kings 3, though, itself is nowhere near a flop, with a decent player base with around 15,000 active users at any given point and amazing reviews on Steam. However, compared to other Paradox games that are still supported like EU4 and Hearts of Iron 4, both of these games almost get double the player base of this game, even with them being 9 and 6 years old. If this wasn't enough pressure for Crusader Kings 3 with the failure of Imperator Rome and it being behind other Paradox games, in September 30th, 2021, Paradox Interactive canceled unannounced projects to focus on games. And you might be like, oh, they canceled projects, that's not big of a deal. You do not understand that cancellation on major projects leads to a huge amount of lost money and loss of lost revenue. Compared to a game like Imperator Rome, since it still was released, they were still able to recoup some money from it, and I'm not sure if they made a profit or not, but they still could make money on the game. With these canceled projects, it is just straight loss. To even prove the point more, Paradox Interactive themselves reported a 265 million Swedish krona write-off for it, or approximately $29 million. $29 million in write-off means that they experienced huge loss for this cancellation, and that is just the write-off. So there is a possibility that they lost even more money than the $29 million. This makes it so there is even more pressure on Crusader Kings 3 because this is probably one of the games that they are focusing on. They canceled these big projects to focus on games they already have. If this wasn't enough, right before this happened, on Friday, September 3rd, previous CEO of Paradox Interactive stepped down due to differentiating opinions on how to run the company. While the previous CEO was focused on looking at old games, it allowed other games to fall behind in the Vampire series. If this financial burden alone wasn't enough, for the past 3 quarters in the last year, Paradox Interactive has experienced a loss in revenue in each quarter. In the first quarter of 2021, Paradox had a revenue decrease of 9% compared to the previous year. In the second quarter, they experienced a revenue decrease of 13% in the previous year. In the third quarter and the last quarter reported, which was the one where they canceled the titles, they had a revenue decrease of approximately 42% compared to the last year. Through these last 3 quarters compared to the previous year, that means Paradox Interactive had a decrease in 22% on their revenue in the same period year, which is a lot of money. And if you want to hear how much money it is, I'll tell you right now. This decrease in revenue means they had a decrease in revenue for the last 3 quarters of 303 million krona, or they had a decrease in revenue of $33 million, and that is a lot of money. If this wasn't enough pressure already, the DLC itself was moved back. It was scheduled to be released in 2021, and now it is releasing in a couple of weeks on February 8th, 2022. I am a huge fan of pushing back release dates because it allows you to put more work in the game and make sure it's perfect. However, in the consumer eyes, when a studio pushes a game back, this just means that they have higher expectations for the game or DLC. This making, if the game or DLC has bugs or imperfection, it to receive even more criticism because the consumers believed they had extra time. This making that they expect the DLC to be perfect. And that is all the pressure relying on Crusader Kings. The financial burdens, the CEO stepping down, the failure of Imperial Rome, the delay, the pushback, the murmurs in the community that the game is slowly dying. But now let's talk about where I stand for Crusader Kings 3. Crusader Kings 3 is one of my favorite games I've ever played. I love it so much. I liked it enough that it became a daily life for me for almost a year. However, the more I played Crusader Kings 3, the more I realized it doesn't have that much replayability or differentiating playability. You can replay it, but it's not very different from the last thing you had. And if it wasn't for the mod community, I think my playtime would have decreased dramatically. In the base game, if you don't play with any mods, you kind of play as a feudal nation, tribe nation, and a Viking in Scandinavia. And that's pretty much the game. After that, you're kind of just repeating the same thing. You don't get that much different plays from playing in different areas, which is something why I'm expecting the culture to have a key point in the DLC. However, with that is kind of a staple of Paradox game, is the replayability. And I have to say, in the recent years, Crusader Kings 3 has one of the worst replayabilities out of any Paradox game. In Hearts of Iron 4, you play as a different nation, you get a pretty different experience. While in EU4, the same goes for that. While in Crusader Kings 3, you kind of feel like you're doing the same thing with different nations. I think the royal court and cultures could help with these factors. With this being in mind, comparing it to Crusader Kings 2, that game was so good at having a different experience every single game. Hopefully, they're able to use Royal Court to mimic that in Crusader Kings 3. After 1,000 hours of playtime in Crusader Kings 3, I couldn't play the game anymore. I was just bored out of my mind. To be clear, 1,000 hours of playtime in a game is insane and amazing, and I nod my hats out to Paradox Interactive. I'm a huge fan of Paradox Interactive, and I can't wait to see them do more. I think Royal Court could be the best DLC ever made by Paradox if the pressure didn't get to them. Based on everything I see with Royal Court, I think it is the success that Crusader Kings 3. However, I'm being carefully optimistic because there are a lot of new things that they have not tried, and there is a ton of pressure on this. And when there's a ton of pressure, bugs happen, mistakes happen, people are stressed, work gets harder. I think Throne Room, artifacts, and culture are great items to the game and will make the game amazing if done right. I will most likely be making a full breakdown of the DLC and update in a week. I think Crusader Kings 3 has the possibility to be the best Paradox game ever made. However, I am afraid that the pressure may have gotten to Paradox Interactive and made them do drastic changes that the community may not like, or made them rush out, even with the delay, a non-perfect product. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hope you have a good one. See you there. Bye.